One of the best things you can do to improve the world is to improve yourself. Jen Sincero. Hi, I am Jaclyn Steele, and welcome to Self-Discovery. Howard Thurman so beautifully wrote, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive." Coming alive. That, my friends, is what self-discovery is all about.
Who is it? You wear that mask for?
All right, beautiful listeners. Oh, where to begin? It's a little hard for me to even identify that. I feel like a lot of what you're going to hear in today's episode is me speaking from the heart. And my editor, Terry, can attest to this. I have put off creating the content for this episode really until the last minute. This episode is coming out in less than 48 hours and still needs to go through the process of editing. But that is because I feel like the state of our nation, United States, and the state of the world right now is such that I have wanted to take a lot of time to marinate on what I'm going to share with you today. And what I am going to share with you today, I want to be totally transparent. It is imperfect. It is the best I have with the information that I have and the research that I've done. I am not an expert on science. I'm not an expert on politics, though I have studied both. I don't want to go too deep into that other than to say this. Everything I share on this podcast is something that I take extremely seriously. And the reason I take it seriously is not just for myself and the kind of information that I take in and allow into my life, but because you are listening. And I don't want to cry here, but I value you and your ears and your thoughts and your mind so much. Whether you are somebody that listens every single week, or you are somebody that pops in and chooses episodes here and there, I want you to know how deeply I value you and your time. And I never, ever, ever, ever want to waste it. In the past, I have avoided pretty much all political conversations. I've talked a little bit about global issues, but not a lot. But I feel like things have gotten to a point now, to a pinnacle in which if I don't say something, I am not going to be true to what I believe is my integrity. And so I want to address a few things today that may be uncomfortable for some people to listen to, but it also may be a huge relief for you to listen to it, to know that somebody out there thinks the way that you think or has questions like you have, so that you feel less alone. This time in our country and in our world is so polarizing. And personally, I feel like that is the worst of all evils, when we are pointing the finger at each other instead of what's actually going on, which is a pandemic. It's been so convoluted that people are now fighting each other and fearing each other versus putting our energy toward something that requires our energy, which is solving these problems. So I'm going to address some of that today and hopefully quench, decrease some fear and increase some hope, and then also give us some ideas of what we can do to improve our lives individually and improve our communities, because that's what this podcast is about. It is about taking ownership of our lives. I called it self-discovery because I do believe with every fiber of my being that life gets easier when we know who we are, and when we ask these questions, and when we have difficult conversations. And when we're brave enough too, to have conversations with people that may have differing viewpoints. So that is the ethos of what I am about and what this podcast stands for. And again, I thank you for your beautiful ears and your beautiful mind listening in on today's episode. Before I dive into today's content, and again, I'm going to address several things, so it may feel more topical, like we're going from topic to topic. But that is because I feel like at this point in time, if I don't address these things, I will not be in line with my own integrity. Before we dive in though, I want to say, if you haven't subscribed to this podcast, please do so. Please leave a review. I read every single one, and they help so much in the algorithm in allowing this podcast to be seen and heard by others. So if you like this podcast, please write a review. Share it with your friends. Let's get the word out. Let's create a world that is less fearful and more loving, and we can do that together. And then in addition, text me. Please, I love having conversations with you guys individually. You can reach me at 480-531-6858. Again, that's 480-531-6858. And if you want to join my Sacred Rebel Affirmation community, it's totally free. Just type in, after you text me, sacred, SACRED, and you'll automatically be added. This is a community that I started where I just a couple times a week send something that I feel like is important, encouraging, uplifting, challenging the status quo, but really geared toward empowering your day and empowering that moment in your life. All right. That being said, let's dive in to a few things that I think are really important for us to address today. I want to talk to you about 4 things. And again, if it seems disjointed, I apologize, but to me, these were the things that I felt like I really needed to address. The first is 9/11. The second is ivermectin. The third is thinking for ourselves. And the fourth is personal responsibility. I am going to start with 9/11. And the reason I think this is so timely is because the juxtaposition of where our country was right after 9/11 to where it is 20 years later in some ways feels like it could not be more different. We were so unified after such a horrific tragedy. And I think, again, we could be unified after the tragedies of the last year, but the opposite has happened. And in my addressing of 9/11 and in my addressing of ivermectin, I'm going to read what I took a really long time to write, and I shared on social media because I feel like I spent so much time gathering these thoughts because I felt like they were, again, if I didn't say them, it was not me walking in my own integrity. So with that being said, I'm going to read you my 9/11 story and then the conclusion that I came to at the end. Here it is. It was my freshman year of high school. I was in French class and looking forward to seeing my crush, Matt Cesaretti, after the bell rang. Somewhere in between conjugation and forming a basic sentence en français, a teacher entered the room and whispered something in Mrs. Eagleson's ear. Next thing I knew, a TV on a metal rolling cart was being wheeled into our little ground level classroom. My classmates and I watched in awe as we saw the Twin Towers in flames and eventually crumble to the ground. We saw panic in the eyes of the people we were watching. We saw panic in the eyes of each other. An attack on American soil was unfathomable. It felt to every American like such an intense, deep, sinister violation of our way of life. How could we be attacked like this and in such a terror-inducing, gruesome way? Something shifted in my 15-year-old self that day. My sweet, sheltered American life felt like it was cracking at the foundation, and that reality was buoyed when the bell rang. The hallways were silent. Students of all ages were in shock. I saw Matt, and instead of discussing weekend plans, We talked about our country going to war, not yet knowing some of our closest friends would be joining that battle, not yet knowing my future husband would be deployed to that battle for 2 tours of duty. I think of the first responders and their families. I think of the faithful employees who with their first cup of coffee were settling into what they thought would be a normal Tuesday. I think of the people on those hijacked airplanes knowing they would never touch the ground or their loved ones again. I think of the people trapped on the top floors of those towers, contemplating burning to death or jumping out and plummeting out of a 94-story building. I think of the people who called in sick that day, or who were running late, or who had an off-site meeting, and then, upon realizing what had happened, the heavy settling in and elation of the fact that they had just cheated death. I think of the Pentagon workers looking out of their windows, unable to believe their eyes or move fast enough to escape what was coming for them. I think of the heroes on United Flight 93 who knowingly gave their lives so that others might be saved. I remember President Bush's speech that night, the resolve, anger, and confidence in his voice assuring our shaken nation that we would find and bring to justice whomever was responsible for these acts of terror. I remember the candlelit vigils all over the country. I remember strangers hugging strangers and America coming together in a way I'd never witnessed before in my short life. I'll never forget September 11th, 2001. And I know that if you were alive then, you won't either. It's impossible to. It marked the changing of our nation and life as we knew it. Here we are, 20 years later, solemnly remembering this day and this time and honoring those who were tragically lost. Devastatingly, it's hard to imagine our country being more divided than it is now. Our America is imperfect. Our government is confusing and very hard to trust right now. But behind the politics and fear-mongering mass media, I can't help but hear that indomitable heartbeat of our citizens that was present en masse 20 years ago today. We are still here. We still have the choice to come together. We still have the choice to stop viewing each other as enemies, but rather to view each other as fellow Americans, each doing our best with the information we have in these unprecedented times. 20 years ago, we were acutely aware that liberals and conservatives, or nowadays vaccinated and unvaccinated, were not the enemy. The enemy was fear. That's why all the force of America was dedicated and behind driving it out. We didn't ever want to live in fear the way we had on that fateful day, ever again. Now here we are, 20 years later, with many of us living in fear of each other. This cannot be the answer, and this cannot be the way forward. I don't pretend to know what to do next, but I am very confident solutions will require people from all viewpoints coming together. An idea, a movement, a nation is made stronger by brilliant minds of differing backgrounds coming together for a common cause. The masterminds behind 9/11 wanted us to live in fear from that day forward. They wanted to divide, weaken, and terrorize us, to see our great nation crumble to ash, to watch us fighting amongst ourselves while they plotted and planned. They delighted in and were motivated by the idea of that. And they still are. And there still are forces outside of the masterminds behind 9/11 that want that same thing. Let us refuse to let them continue to win. The next thing I want to talk about is ivermectin. There has been so much going around about ivermectin. Jimmy Kimmel is talking about it. Pretty much all mass media is talking about it. And people that are talking about it online, unless they are against it, are being censored. And the reason I think this is so important is because if this indeed does have the power to save people's lives, then I think we need to be talking about it because people's lives need to be saved. And also, if it's true, what these studies are saying, that when taken proactively, people do not get COVID, then that's also worth exploring. So here's what I wrote about ivermectin after the research that I did. Ivermectin was actually approved by the FDA in the 90s. It has also won a Nobel Peace Prize for its efficacy. It's been around a long time and been proven highly effective in curing river blindness, elephantitis, and some other parasitic infections in humans, not just horses, guys. It appears safe in many of the studies testing its effectiveness with COVID in the right dosage. And it's even said by those studying it that even if it wasn't effective, it would still be safe and wouldn't cause harm while treating a COVID positive patient. Furthermore, there are so many studies being done worldwide that are showing it is actually an extremely effective medicine for treating and preventing COVID. It's been around so long that there are generic versions of it. And this is why, again, guys, I feel like it's so important for us to be dissecting what the media is saying, because they're saying the FDA hasn't approved it for use in treating COVID patients, but the FDA has approved this medicine in humans decades ago. There's so many nuances. Okay, so again, it's been around, ivermectin has been around so long that there are generic versions of it. It's super cheap and it's readily available. Or in other words, and this is the kicker here, there isn't a lot of money to be made on ivermectin. In what I saw in Mexico, you can have multiple doses of ivermectin for less than $1. In the United States, because of our healthcare system, it is more expensive than that, but still far less expensive than, let's say, like remdesivir, which is what they're treating a lot of COVID patients with. That one bag of remdesivir, because it's given through an IV from what I understand, it's $3,000. Again, I don't want to be fear-mongering here, but do you guys want to know some really, really wild statistics? Pfizer and BioNTech are slated to make $33 billion this year. $33 billion. Moderna slated to make $20 billion. AstraZeneca slated to make $1 billion. And this is a quote. The profits have created at least 9 new billionaires after shares in companies producing the shots soared. Shots meaning vaccines. They are worth a combined $19.3 billion. And sources for all those stats are from CNN and The Guardian. I find this to be really, really interesting. And I'm wondering if you find this to be very interesting and suspect as well. Because mass media is positioning ivermectin as a fringe treatment. That it's medicine for horses. That it's a bogus treatment against C19. And people are idiots for taking it. Again, I'm not anti-vaccination, but I am anti-information regulation. And what I've found that if I share anything on social media that goes against the narrative of what mass media is trying to get us to do, my post is buried or there is a warning on top of it. Immediately. I did that on Facebook and did a check just to see what happened. And in less than 60 seconds, there was a warning on top of my post. So, mass media is positioning ivermectin as a fringe treatment. I'm sure a lot of you have heard how Joe Rogan took ivermectin, and CNN was saying that he was taking fringe medicine, blah, blah, blah. What CNN and all of these other very left-wing, and again, I am not a Democrat or a conservative. I am an independent. I like to look at facts. I like to study different issues and then make my decision based on the information that I find. But what I'm saying is these left-wing mass media channels, they hammered Joe over taking ivermectin. But what they didn't say in their article was he was tested again after 5 days of having COVID, and his test came back negative. So he beat COVID in 5 days doing these fringe treatments. And one of those fringe treatments was ivermectin. He also, I think, took some kind of antibody treatment. Anyway, you can look that up yourself. So I'm not anti-vaccination. I'm anti-information regulation, because when we have our information regulated, it is a million times harder to find the truth. Also, when we are allowed to have discussions and have differing viewpoints, in general, the best idea, the best solution rises to the top. I'm not saying ivermectin is the answer. I don't know that for certain. But if it's being proven effective in study after study, isn't it worth giving it a chance before it's dismissed as horse medicine or horse goo? If you look up the way that Mexico has treated people with ivermectin and then their hospitals emptying out, or the provinces in India who were hit so hard earlier this year with COVID, who started treating people with ivermectin, and the results that they're having and their hospital numbers going down, isn't it worth exploring if this could be a solution for us in the United States if it's going to save people's lives? I mean, my gosh, it just makes so much logical sense to me. So going back to information, regulation, and censorship, free speech is part of our Constitution and was placed in there because our founding fathers knew what it was like not to have it. Free speech, in part, built the strongest and most powerful nation in the world in record time. The sharing and discussing of information is vital to a thriving society. It is only with discussion and study and information that we can find truth and make informed decisions. That's why I'm saying something. That's why I'm asking questions that are, in my opinion, logical questions. Not because I like creating noise online, but because I think radicalized and politically indoctrinated thought is so loud right now that people like me who are curious and want to have evidence and facts and be allowed to ask questions are being treated condescendingly, or worse, we're being silenced. A society that doesn't question what is happening around them is not a healthy one. All we have to do is study world history to be reminded of that. So if you have questions about everything that is happening right now, know that you are not alone. What you are feeling is normal, and I think a very healthy reaction to a wildly confusing firestorm of politically and monetarily motivated information. The next thing I want to talk about is thinking for ourselves. Right now, our country is divided between left and right, is what it feels like from my perspective. I don't feel like there are a lot of people who are in the middle, who are asking logical questions freely and being heard without being censored or spoken condescendingly to, or just completely ignored. And so that's why I think thinking for ourselves needs to be something that we encourage of each other and do on a daily basis, because information is constantly being fed to us. So with that, a couple of things that I like to ask myself when I hear a new piece of information. The first thing is, and this is a discussion I had with somebody as they were saying, I don't know what to think about the vaccines. I don't know what to think about President Biden's new mandates. I don't know what to think about X, Y, and Z. And it's understandable. My gosh, there's so much information flooding in so quickly. And it's hard to know. It's really hard to know. This same person said, I'll listen to something and I'll think, oh, that makes such logical sense. And then I'll listen to the different viewpoint and I think they make sense too. So that's not uncommon. If you're feeling that, that's normal. But these questions, I think, are really, really, really important when you are up against new information and you're trying to figure out what to do next. Because as we know in this pandemic, we are all having to pivot. We're all having to be flexible. Some people are choosing to get vaccines, some are not, etc. No judgment either way. But here is what I want to say about thinking for ourselves. When a new piece of information comes in, whether it's an article, a podcast, watching the news on TV, seeing it online, etc. The first thing I think we need to be asking ourselves is, does this resonate as truth? Your truth indicator inside of who you are is so effing accurate. And I want you to tune into that and trust it. Oh my gosh, trust it, trust it, trust it. The next thing I want you to ask is, what is this person's motive in sharing this message? Are they sharing it out of love because they want to make the world a better place? Or are they sharing it out of fear because they want people to take a specific kind of action? Is there money behind what they're saying? Some kind of monetary motive? Are they going to make more money, or is who they're working for going to make more money based off of what they are saying? Or is there power or a desire for dominance behind the message? Is this person sharing what they're sharing, if people were to listen to it, going to gain influence and be able to dominate them and control them in some way, shape, or form, or get money out of them? Or is this message really for the public good? Because in general, what I learned a long time ago in school was factual information presents both sides of an argument. Both sides, so that people can get accurate, truthful information and then make a decision for themselves. So I'm going to repeat those questions one more time because they're so important. Does this resonate as truth? What is this person's motive in sharing this message, or this company's motive, or this channel's motive? Is it out of love, or is it out of fear because they want people to take a specific kind of action? Is there any money behind it, or monetary incentive? Or is there power or a desire for dominance behind it? Gosh, guys, there's no way to make people take action faster than if you make them feel fearful. Or is it really for the public good? Okay, last thing I want to talk about is personal responsibility. At the beginning of this episode, I shared a quote from Jen Sincero, and she said, one of the best things you can do to improve the world is to improve yourself. And my goodness, I could not agree with this more. Again, the ethos of this podcast is about self-discovery. It is about how when we light up ourselves, we automatically start lighting up the people around us and therefore the rest of the world. We get to choose how we walk in this world and how we treat people. We get to choose how we participate, whether that be in person or online or however you show up in the world. We are responsible for how we act, how we think, who we are. And in times like this, where fear is the bottom line, fear is this thread that is being drawn through everything, we can choose, you, me, we can choose not to live in fear. We can choose, just like I mentioned in last week's episode on fear and handling fear and transmuting it into something better and higher vibe, which I highly recommend you listen to. We can choose not to live like that. and not to spread more of it. We can choose to lean into the facts and look at the facts before we allow our minds to go crazy. Personal responsibility, especially in a time like this, is so beautiful and so important. Instead of finger pointing or blaming other people, understanding, hey, how can I contribute to this? Or how have I contributed to this, even if it's in a negative way? And how do I rectify that? How can I be better today so that I can help the other people around me be better? How can I be empowering to others? How can I be uplifting to others? How can I practice self-care to myself during these times of uncertainty so that I am not wasting 24 hours a day living in anxiety and fear, even when the world is in crisis? This day is still a gift. This moment is still a gift. This second is still a gift. So if we want to make the world a better place right now, if we want to, even if we just want to make our individual lives better right now, which will have the ripple effect of making other people's lives better, I think the content that I shared in today's episode is vital. We've got to come together as a country and stop pointing fingers, stop with the horrific vitriol that we see online, and start asking questions. And even if we don't agree with somebody else, allowing them to have their own opinion. That is what this country stands for, and that's also what makes this country so dang beautiful. We also, and I know it's hard and I know it's time consuming, believe me, need to be doing our own research on what's being said and not take mass media for their word. I wish that I could say that we could, but I don't in my heart of hearts believe that we can. I'm in the process of getting a resource list together for people, but to be honest with you, it is so hard and time consuming for me to find information. I would say as a whole, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I do some research online. I do watch some news and I do watch some YouTube videos, but I would say for the most part, I try and get my information from podcasts. The BBC has a great podcast. I loved the New York Times by the Daily, but it's definitely skewed in a specific political direction. There is a podcast called Breaking Points, and it's two people, one a conservative, one a liberal, that break down issues daily that I think is really good. And again, I'm in the process of getting a resource list together because I think that's really important. But so much information is just being censored right now that it's hard. It's hard. And I don't want to give you guys any inaccurate information. So, got off on a little rabbit hole right there. But thinking for ourselves and doing our own research and not taking everything at face value, really doing the work of understanding if it resonates as truth, understanding what the person's or channels or business's motivation is behind in sharing it. And then after dissecting, marinating on, and digesting what's happening, understanding we're personally responsible for our own actions, and our actions can either uplift others or bring them down. Chances are, if you are listening to this podcast, my friend, you are someone that uplifts other people. So that is the message of today's podcast. I wish I could hug each and every one of you right now, because I know that this is a tough time for a lot of people, but I also have such hope. I have such hope that people are opening their eyes and understanding that we also have an opportunity right now to do things differently and to do things in a way that serves the masses. I love you. Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, let me know. Share it with a friend. If you're finding it helpful, please spread the word. And other than that, I want to just Take a breath. And pray blessings and love and joy and peace and high vibrations over you. I'll talk to you soon.